Good evening, good afternoon, sorry. Shalom, everybody, and welcome. I'd like to start off with a story. I've said stories before. Maybe I'll share the story with you. It's about two Jewish beggars that are sitting outside of a church, and one of them is dressed with a cross around his neck, and the other one has a giant Star of David. One is obviously Jewish, right? And the other one is, at least trying to look a little Christian. And they're both sitting as the two beggars right outside of the church steps. As the people come out of the church on a Sunday morning, all the parishioners, where do you think they go to give alms? They're all giving alms to the Christian-looking beggar, right? And the Jewish-looking beggar is not getting much. After a while, one of the people comes out. He has a little rachmanis, a little compassion. He comes over to the Jewish-looking beggar and he says, listen, they say you Jews are smart, but this is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. I don't understand. What inspires you to think that people outside of a church would want to support a beggar who looks like this when 10 feet away from you is another beggar who is all Christian? What are you thinking? The Jewish beggar then turns to the other beggar and he says, hey, Moshe, look who's telling the Goldstein brothers how to do their business. One thing about the Jews is that we are very, very weak at marketing when it comes to our faith. We are very weak at marketing our faith. In fact, whilst other religions have missionaries, they have missions, they have proselytizing, those guys in the airport that are selling you salvation, right? You know what I'm talking about? You have all these kind of missionaries out there. The Jews, not only do we not have such proselytizing efforts, we actively discourage conversion. Now, how could this be good for business, right? Most religions out there are universal, which means that what that means is that they believe that there's one God for all people. They also believe that anyone who doesn't subscribe to their belief is a sinner. And that's why they proselytize. Now, that makes sense. It makes sense, right? They believe that their God is relevant to all people, and anybody who doesn't believe in their God is a sinner. So that's why they proselytize. There's actually a code of conduct out there in the ancient times that whenever a nation was conquered by another nation, the loser was expected to convert to the faith of the winner. The Jews were a peculiar exception that when conquered, they were the only nation who was conquered by the Babylonians, the Greeks, and the Romans who refused to submit to their religion. They maintained their Jewish identity, which is why we have the Hanukkah story. Because the Greeks, they wanted everybody to become Hellenized, Greekified, but the Jews, they just maintained. They refused. They were stubborn. That's how we have Hanukkah. It's interesting that the Muslims were not like this. The Muslims, unlike the Christians who forced the Jews to convert, the Muslims did not. They allowed the Jews to have something called a dhimmi status, which is a secondary citizen status. You weren't allowed to ride a horse. You weren't allowed to build a building that was taller than the church. You weren't allowed to have certain professions. They were degrading to the Jews, but they weren't trying to, they were at least tolerating the Jews with the hope that ultimately one day they would convert to Islam. Which is why it's very interesting when you read the books of anti-Semitism, you realize that Christian anti-Semitism was far more brutal. But Muslim anti-Semitism was far more humiliating. The Christians just killed us if we didn't convert. The Muslims, they didn't kill us, but they would humiliate us. But when it comes to Judaism, however, we don't actually believe that you need to be Jewish in order to experience salvation. Unlike other religions that say you've got to be like us, repent or perish, says the proverbial bumper sticker. In Judaism, it's not like that. We say, listen, if you're a Jew, terrific. And if you're not a Jew, that's also great. You know why? Because God doesn't make mistakes. And if God created you that way, then good, stay that way. In fact, we don't Judaism has that element of universalism, which means that our God is relevant to all nations. But we don't have the element of proselytizing, which means that you got to be like us in order to be saved. We, in fact, believe that every single human being is capable of nurturing a deep, wholesome, and meaningful relationship with God Almighty, as they are, even if they're not Jewish, with the ability to actually merit the world to come. Let me show you this black and white in text number 1 in the Code of Jewish Law, page 3, where Maimonides tells us as follows: the righteous individuals amongst the nations have a share in the world to come. There it is, black on white. It doesn't only say that Jews are saved, it says no, even the righteous amongst the nations, amongst the non-Jews, are also worthy of the world to come. They have a share. Sorry, not even worthy. They have a share in the world to come. Now, there's one difference between Jews and non-Jews, and it's actually surprising. It's counterintuitive. For a Jew to merit the world to come, he's got a much more difficult way to go than a non-Jew to merit the world to come. You see, a Jew has how many mitzvahs? Can anybody remember? 613 commandments. That's a lot. You know how many mitzvahs a Gentile has? The Gentiles? 7. That's it. To be a righteous Gentile, 7 and you're done. To be a righteous Jew is much more complicated. I mean, let's be honest, right? You see, I told you we're bad at marketing, right? This is true, right? It's exactly right. To be a righteous Gentile is a lot easier than it is to be a righteous Jew. We're not the ones to say repent or perish. We're like, listen, you're going to become a Jew. Do you really want to become a Jew? We say to them. Like, when somebody comes to convert, we say to them, like, do you need a rabbi or a psychiatrist? Like, why would you want to join the most persecuted nation upon the face of the earth? Is there something wrong with you? Or you're maybe a masochist? Maybe you're suicidal? Maybe you love being persecuted, right? What's wrong with you? What is it? We actually actively discourage people to convert to Judaism. With this introduction, we ask ourselves, okay, sounds good, Rabbi. So why do we encourage? So why do we allow? Fine, we don't encourage conversion, but why do we allow conversion at all? There should be zero tolerance for conversion to take place, right? And here we learn a beautiful secret of Jewish mysticism. Jewish mysticism teaches us that the reason why someone would want to convert to Judaism is because they actually have a Jewish soul which was lost. They have a Jewish soul that was lost. It was born into a Gentile body, family, community, and now it's desperately making its way home. That's the reason why we allow conversion. You know, there's a beautiful story of the rabbi who signed my rabbinical certificate. His name was Rabbi Chaim Gutnick in Melbourne, Australia. And he was a rabbi back in Melbourne already in the 50s, I think it was. At one point, he went to a certain community. I think it was in Adelaide. Another version says Balaclava. Either way, he encounters this young Gentile Anglican teenager that comes to him and says, "You're a rabbi?" "Yes, I want to convert to Judaism." And he didn't want to take her seriously. She was just, she was just a teenager. And she persisted and insisted and begged and cajoled and pleaded, "Please allow me to convert to Judaism." He said, "Look, I really can't convert you. You're a teenager. You're just a kid." Eventually, he promised her that he's going to write a letter about her to the Rebbe in New York. So I think at one point she got sick. And then she calmed down. She felt better when he said she was writing to the Rebbe. He was writing to the Rebbe about her. At one point, a while later, when the Rebbe was talking to this Rabbi Gutnick, the Rebbe asked him, "And what about the Jewish girl from Adelaide or Balaclava?" And Rabbi Gutnick was like, "What? The Jewish girl? The Jewish girl from Balaclava? Like what? He was filled with so many questions. He figured by the time he gets back to Australia, in those days it took like a week to travel back, two boats and an airplane, maybe. He makes it back to Australia, goes straight to her house, and he looks for her mother. He confronts the mother and he says to her, what are you not telling me? What is it that you're not telling me? And the mother eventually breaks down. She says, look, I was born as a Jewess in Poland before the war. They survived the war. They ran from the war. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but she fled as far as she possibly could from Europe and vowed never to torture her children with the curse of being Jewish. So she was going to go to Australia, and there she was going to raise a family as pure Gentiles. She never told her daughter that she's Jewish. And what happens? This girl could not control herself. She had this yearning, this thirst, this pining of her spirit, which is irrational. You can't explain it. She wanted to become a Jew. And that's the reason why Gentiles want to convert to Judaism according to Jewish mysticism. It's not because they're seeking persecution or they want to be the most despised nation in the United Nations. No, that's not what they're looking for. What they're looking for is a soul desperate, yearning to come home. In fact, in the Talmud, the way the Talmud describes a convert, it says, is a convert who converted, which is a very strange term. It should say a Gentile who converted. No, it doesn't say that. It says a convert who converted. Why? Because this person was always was a convert. Even before they knew it, they already were a convert, and now they finally converted. Would that be a same thing? Jew of choice is a convert. Which way do they convert? Okay, we'll talk about it at the end of the class. I'm going to mention something about that. Yes, Nancy. She was already Jewish. Yeah, she did not have to convert. And I want you to see how careful, how much we discourage conversion in text number 2. Take a look, page number 3. Text number 2, we do not attempt to convince people to convert to Judaism. This is from the Talmud. And we do not immediately accept anyone that asks to convert. There will be severe divine consequences for any Jew that proselytizes. However, we do accept non-Jews that are persistent in their desire to convert. And that's from the Talmud. So what then? We explain that these are the lost souls. Take a look at text number 3. Our sages teach that when we received the Torah on Mount Sinai all those years ago, the soul of the convert, who would join us only many generations later, was already present at Sinai. This soul was at the incredible event at Mount Sinai, although its actual joining our people was deferred until now. Now, why were they lost? What happened to these souls that they just fell off the wagon? What happened? Kabbalah explains that these are extraordinarily powerful souls. Souls so powerful that they needed to take a different route. For example, 2 analogies in the Kabbalah. When you're shooting an arrow, normally when you're throwing something, you're going to throw a piece of a rock, you'll throw it that way, right? But if something's going to be very powerful, you'll pull backwards, the arrow will go back into the bow before it goes forward, right? When something's much stronger, it's going to be counterintuitive. It's going to go in the wrong direction before it goes in the right direction. So another analogy in the Kabbalah is of a lever. If you want to pick something up, you got to push down, right? It's like a seesaw. You want to pick it up, then you got to push it down. So that opposite motion is the spiritual journey of the convert that has an extraordinarily powerful soul that needed to go a different route, a circuitous route, in order to discover their Jewish identity. But when they get there, they are extraordinarily powerful. And that's why the gifts that they bring along through their journey are extraordinary gifts that they bring to the Jewish people. Now, we don't have a way to find these souls. We don't know. We don't have a machine to test for lost souls. That would be nice, right? Imagine you could go on a date and say, let me just take your soul temperature and try to figure you out, right? Imagine, that would be nice. We don't have such a machine. So therefore, the way that we figure out, the way we identify lost souls is through the test of persistence. We make it hell of a hard. And if they still endure, I'm going to get you in a second, then we know that they are authentic Jewish souls. And I'd like to turn your attention to page 38 at the end of lesson 1. There's a little chart over there showing some of the notable converts of Jewish history on page 38. It shows you some of the notable converts and how extraordinary their gifts to Judaism were. Today, we're going to cover just 3 converts. In this fourth session course, we're going to cover 3 personalities in each session for a total of 12. Today, we're going to cover 3 great converts and the special gifts that they gave us. Yes, Jill. The question is being asked for those that didn't hear it. If a Jewish child was converted out of Judaism, do they need to convert back into Judaism? The answer is no. Because you cannot un-Judify yourself. You cannot become un-Jewish. There's no way out of this club. Once you become a Jew, you cannot become un-Jewish. There's no such thing. You know, if a tiger thinks he's a chicken, he might eat seeds and squawk all day, but he's still a tiger. He just needs a psychiatrist, right? Or maybe a good rabbi. There's a friend of mine in the community here. He's a Catholic. He's actually a member of the shul. He's a Catholic person. Lovely, lovely guy. And he tells me that he's a lapsed Catholic. Lapsed Catholic. I said, hey, what does that even mean? Does that mean you didn't pay your membership dues to the church? Like, what does that mean, lapsed? So he says, no, because if you don't fulfill all the laws of the Catholic Church, then you're no longer considered Catholic. And I believe that the same is true of Islam. That if you don't observe the tenets of Islam, then you're not considered a Muslim, I think. But in Judaism, it's got nothing to do. A Jew is who you are, not what you choose to believe or what you think you believe or what you choose to observe, right? It's your identity, right? Good. So let's begin with our first up today. And this convert, his name is Onkelos. Onkelos lived 100, the story begins in 2,000 years ago, 117 CE, when the Emperor Trajan died, succeeded by the Emperor Hadrian. This is about 50 years after the Roman destruction of our temple. The Jews were suffering terribly, and they had high hopes for Emperor Hadrian. In 129 CE, he visited Israel and even granted permission to the Jews to rebuild the Holy Temple that was destroyed by the Romans. The Jews were so excited that they minted coins in his honor. You can see a picture of those coins on page 5. But the Jews were soon slandered against, and plans to rebuild were abruptly canceled. This Hadrian began to attack the Jews, renaming Jerusalem, the city of Jerusalem, as a Roman city, Aelia Capitolina. He even turned the temple campus into a house of idolatry devoted to the idol, the Roman idol, Jupiter. The Jews didn't take this very well. Same thing happened in the Hanukkah story when the Greeks tried to put a statue, an idol in the temple. The Hanukkah revolt began. Same thing happened here when they put a statue of Jupiter in the temple. The Jews revolted with the very famous revolt of the Bar Kokhba rebellion in 132 CE. Bar Kokhba rebellion, you may have heard of this rebellion, was when the Jews very successfully drove out the Romans and established an independent Jewish state in Israel for 2.5 years. They minted their own coins. You may have heard of Beitar. The Beitar Zionist movement is based on this revolt, which was based and headquartered in Beitar, until the Romans, they vanquished the Roman legion, until ultimately more than half of the Roman army was sent by Hadrian to quell this rebellion. And when they ultimately did, they really were trying to make an example out of the Jews. They refused to allow the Jews to bury the corpses for 7 years, I believe. And in fact, to this day, when you say the grace after meals, when we say the grace after meals after bread, the fourth and final blessing is instituted in gratitude to God. It's a long story. When they finally merited to bury those slaughtered in the massacre of Beitar, when this rebellion was quelled, and when they found the bodies of those who had been killed after 7 years, maybe 14 years with different versions, the bodies were still intact. They were still fresh, as if they had recently died. Very interesting story. At that time, Hadrian really was very upset with the Jews. He became one of the most vicious anti-Semites in all of Jewish history. He imposed draconian decrees against the Jews, including a prohibition against the bris, a prohibition against Shabbos observance, the Jewish calendar, Torah study. Many sages were killed. And it was in this environment that this man, Onkelos, rose to convert to Judaism. What's fascinating about him is that he was none other than Hadrian's own nephew. Emperor Hadrian's own nephew. Can you imagine? Hitler's nephew converts to Judaism. That's the story, right? That's what happened over here. This guy was worse than Hitler. I mean, I know that's hard to imagine, but when you read the Talmudic accounts of how many Jews were massacred, it was many times more than the Holocaust. So the Roman Empire was apparently more effective than the Nazis. But he was the nephew of Hadrian. It seems like his story of conversion happened either just before or just after the Bar Kokhba rebellion. But at that time, clearly, it was life endangering to become Jewish. I'd like to share his story with you on page 7, text number 4. The Medrash, which is the oral Torah, tells us the story of who Onkelos was and why he chose to rebel against his uncle. Text number 4. Onkelos the convert was the son of Hadrian's sister. He wished to convert, but he was afraid of his uncle Hadrian. Onkelos told Hadrian, I want to engage in business. If you're lacking gold and silver, Hadrian replied, my treasury is open for you. That's a very nice uncle. Everybody needs a rich uncle, right? Onkelos said, I wish to travel abroad in business in order to become acquainted with other people. I would like your advice about what investments to make. Hadrian replied, here's my advice. When you see merchandise that is valued lowly and disregarded, invest in it. Eventually, its value will rise and you will make a profit. That sounds good, right? Benign. Onkelos traveled to the land of Israel and he studied Torah. A while later, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua met Onkelos and noticed that his countenance was changing. They told each other, Onkelos is studying Torah. Remember, that's Hitler's nephew, right? As Onkelos became close to these scholars, he began asking them questions and they supplied him with explanations. Onkelos returned to his uncle Hadrian. Hadrian asked him, why has your countenance changed? I guess he probably had a beard in yarmulke and tzitzis by now. Your business must have failed, or maybe someone is oppressing you. No, I am your relative. No one would oppress me, dear uncle. So why has your countenance changed? He says, I've studied Torah and even circumcised myself. Ouch. Who advised you to do such a thing? You did. I consulted with you. When? When did I tell you to become a Jew? When I asked you what merchandise to invest in, you advised me, quote, when you see merchandise that is valued lowly and disregarded, invest in it. Eventually its value will rise, unquote. Therefore, I traveled amongst all the nations of the world, and I could not find a nation as lowly regarded and as lowly valued and disregarded as the Jewish people. This nation is destined to rise. It was your advice. Hadrian's advisor told him, since Onkelos has converted, you should kill him. Hadrian replied, and this is amazing. My nephew Onkelos was destined to convert from the moment he was conceived. He was destined to convert from the moment he was conceived. That aligns with what I said earlier about the lost souls. Remember? It seems like Hadrian, despite his immorality, was sensitive enough to observe that Onkelos, in fact, was always destined to become a Jew. He always had a Jewish soul. Quite a story. But what motivated Onkelos to make... What motivated Onkelos to want to become a Jew? What motivated him to make such a dramatic move? We can understand this. There was a missing piece of that story. It said that Onkelos came before his uncle Hadrian. There was actually another part to that story, which I'd like to share with you right now. And that is when Onkelos was, when Hadrian sent troops to bring Onkelos to him, right? And that's the next story, which is going to give us a little insights, some more details as to why Onkelos chose to convert to Judaism. Take a look at text number 5. Once again, this is from the Talmud, which is the oral Torah, page 9. Onkelos, the son of Clonimus, converted to Judaism. The Roman emperor sent a troop of Roman soldiers to seize him and bring him to the emperor. However, Onkelos attracted them to Judaism with Torah passages that he cited for them, and they converted. Can you imagine? Hadrian sends a troop of soldiers. He says, guys, sit down, have a drink, let's talk a little bit. And he convinces them to become Jews. Yeah, oh my God. The emperor dispatched the second troop of Roman soldiers after Onkelos and ordered them to avoid discussions with him, no talking. As the soldiers arrested Onkelos and led him away, he said to them, let me tell you something trivial. A minor official holds a torch in front of a high official. The high official holds a torch for a duke, and a duke for the governor, and the governor for the emperor. In other words, the lower person protects the higher person, right? Now, does the emperor hold a torch before the common people? Oh, no. No, the soldiers replied. Onkelos continued, yet God Almighty holds a torch in front of the Jewish people. The king protects his subjects. As the Torah states, God went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way for them, and by night in a pillar of fire to provide light for them, quote from Exodus. The entire troop converted to Judaism. Because here they are, they're living with a despotic emperor that is just debased and immoral. And here they learned about God that protects his people. They're like, yeah, this sounds appealing. The emperor dispatched a third troop of soldiers. The emperor dispatched a third troop of soldiers to arrest Onkelos. He ordered them not to talk to Onkelos at all. He says, no talking at all. Not even a small little conversation. He ordered them, as the sages were leading Onkelos away, he saw a mezuzah affixed to a doorpost. They carried him on his shoulders. And what does he do? He kisses the doorpost. What would you do if you saw somebody kissing the doorpost? They were like, what on earth in heaven's name? What are you doing? That's what they said. He placed his hands on the mezuzah and he turned to the soldiers asking, what is this? You tell us, the soldiers replied. They forgot the prohibition. Onkelos explained to them, we go like this. We kiss the doorpost, right? Onkelos explained to them, it is standard practice throughout the world for a mortal king to sit inside his palace while his servants guard him from the outside, but not so the God of Israel. Normally, the king is inside and the servants on the outside. Here, it's the other way around. The mezuzah is God on the outside protecting us, ordinary people on the inside. His servants, the Jewish people, sit inside their homes while he guards them from the outside. Thus, it is stated, God shall guard your departure and your arrival from now and for eternity. When the soldiers heard that, they also converted to Judaism. Consequently, the emperor sent no more soldiers after Onkelos. And that's the story. That's the story of Onkelos. So what happened here is that clearly we can see that what attracted Onkelos to Judaism was probably the same messages that he gave to the Romans as well, which was God's devotion to his people in a world of chaos and pluralism. Can you imagine how hard life must have been as a Roman? You cross somebody in power, and the next thing you know, you're facing a gladiator in the Colosseum, right? There was no values, there was no principles, there was no law and order, due process. Yet here they heard that there's a God who defends his people, who believes in social justice, and that all men were created with certain inalienable rights. All men and women were created in the image of God. Their gods took no interest in human conduct or morality. Only the Roman gods were interested only in their own pleasure, their personal pleasure. It was the values of monotheism. It was the values of God's care, compassion, and concern for his subjects that inspired these people to find their way to faith, to Judaism, to convert. Admittedly, so this is the story of Onkelos. Now, we said before, was a student of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. We said before that the converts are powerful souls, right? Lost souls. Can you imagine a soul born into the family of the greatest anti-Semite of that time, and possibly in all of Jewish history? He had an extraordinary contribution to bring to the Jewish people. Take a look at what Onkelos did, changing the course of Jewish history. Page 12, text number 6. The Aramaic translation of the Torah was composed by Onkelos the convert, who had learned it from Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. What Onkelos managed to do is to create this Aramaic translation of the Torah. He understood, of all people, as a newcomer, he understood the challenges, the language barrier that there was blocking him from accessing Judaism and faith and a relationship with God. He therefore took it upon himself, the monumental task of translating the Torah into the vernacular at that time, which was Aramaic, shattering the language barrier in a translation which was also actually a commentary of the Torah. It was the first commentary of the Torah, as I'll show you in a moment. And it's not so simple to translate something. I'll give you an example. You know the word new? New? How do you say new in English? It's certain words you can't translate. You do it with your hand. That's not a word, right? How do you say that in another language, right? How do you say shmendrik, shlemazel, shlemiel? How do you say these words in English? Shut up. So, you know what? You know what, Billy? If you can't say something nice, say it in Yiddish. So the translation from one language to another will always change dramatically the context. To be a skilled translator, you need to be able to know, to understand the nuances of both languages, to be able to understand how to translate in a way that's going to be not literal, that's going to be still literal, but at the same time will capture the soul of the message. And that was the greatness of Onkelos. He was able to translate without losing the soul of the concept. Being a convert, he could appreciate this, and this was Onkelos's contribution to the people of Israel, to the Jewish people. A lost soul who returned to us, but together with that, he brought the art of translation. He brought the gift of wisdom. You will very rarely find a Chumash, a Bible printed, which does not have the commentary of Onkelos, like here in Aramaic, in the purple. It's very rare to find the Chumash that doesn't have the translation of Onkelos into Aramaic. Like even in our show, we have English Chumashes, but you have the Hebrew, and if you look closely, you'll notice there's actually an Aramaic translation of the Torah. You're supposed to read it every Friday before Shabbos, twice the verse and once the translation of Onkelos, every single Friday for thousands of years. This is the first translation of the Torah. It's the first commentary of the Torah. It's a gift to us by Onkelos the convert. What's interesting also, to give a quick example of how he translates the Torah, in the story of creation, we know that God created Adam and Eve, right? And man was created as a nefesh chaya, as a ruach chaya, as a living spirit. The word nefesh chaya means man was created as a living spirit, but Onkelos translates it as ruach memalala in Aramaic, which means a speaking spirit. Very interesting. Instead of the very literal translation, which means man was a living spirit, he's a speaking spirit, which teaches us volumes about the power of speech. Remember, God created the world through the power of speech, and he spoke and there was light, right? So too we, through our speech, change reality. Change your words and you'll change your worlds. This is just a tiny little example, a drop in the ocean of the profound wisdom taught to us by Onkelos the convert, the first of our three up today. And with that, I'm going to move on to our second. Yeah. He became a very celebrated Jew. And that was the end of what we know about him. Yeah. Yeah, but he actually apparently was allowed to live by his uncle, Hadrian, which was a big deal that he let him live. The advisor who advised Hadrian to kill him himself committed suicide, apparently. Interesting, right? The next one I'd like to share with you is actually the story of an Italian priest. In the 12th century, a man by the name of Johannes from the southern Italian town of Oppido, Luciano. Before we talk about him, I'd like to share with you how we know his story. His story was a long-lost secret until it showed up in the Cairo Geniza. The Geniza, what's a Geniza? Geniza means like a storage. You know, when you have a Torah or a tefillin or a mezuzah or a holy book that's torn or used or broken or worn, or you left a Torah in the rain, for example, what do? You can't throw it in the garbage. It's holy. So what do? You've got to bury it. So every shul in the world has got something called a Geniza. In our shul, it's underneath that cupboard. It's a place where you put old, tattered, torn books, talesim, yarmulkes, tzitzis, mezuzahs. You put them there, and we take it to the cemetery to bury it. That's called the Geniza. Geniza means like a place where things are hidden away. If you've ever been to Prague, to the Alt Neuschul, you know that second floor of the Alt Neuschul, the attic, which is all bricked up right now. It's a long story, where the golem of Prague supposedly lies. He lies beneath a massive pile of Geniza, of hundreds of years of old Torah pages, where the golem of Prague lies, because that was where you stored stuff. And eventually they're supposed to be buried. But in the Cairo Geniza, for some reason that nobody knows, in the Geniza of the Ben Ezra synagogue, which was recently renovated in Egypt, in Cairo, the Geniza pages were never buried. So they sat there for hundreds of years. Even in the Cairo Geniza, which is in the storage room of the Ben Ezra Shul in Cairo, which was recently renovated. And apparently, if you want to, you can still go there today. Even Maimonides, who lived 850 years ago, used this Geniza. So what they found in these Genizas around the world, especially the Cairo Geniza, which is very famous, they found pages that now appear in universities and libraries around the world. Some texts have revolutionized Jewish studies. Amongst these texts, amongst these pages that they found in the Cairo Geniza, they found the scattered texts of the autobiography of Ovadia Hager, Ovadia the convert, a rare and fascinating window into the eventful life of a courageous and devoted convert. He starts off in the year 1074, where he's born Johannes. He's inspired by the sensational news that rocked his town when the bishop of Bari converted to Judaism. And he moves on to have a dream in which he's inspired to study Hebrew. Let's take a look at his story here on text number 7, page 14. This is from his own autobiography. Now, again, it's tattered, so we don't have the beginning of the story, but they were able to piece together the various parts of the story. So it starts off, whose name is Opido. He took a wife named Maria. This is his father and mother. And Maria conceived and bore unto Drew, her husband, 2 sons on the same day, twins. The firstborn, according to the usual manner of women, as to their children, to whom they gave their name Rogerius, that is, Roger. As for the second son, his lower parts came out first, his mother bearing him with great pain. She gave him the name Johannes, that is, Jovan. The youths grew up. Rogerius became a man who sought the sword in warfare, the older brother, whereas Johannes, the younger twin, became a man seeking knowledge and wisdom in his books. It's interesting, this similarity here in the text to the biblical account of the twins born to Isaac and Rebekah. Jacob and Esau. There was twins. The older one was a hunter. The younger one was a scholar. Jacob and Esau, right? Interesting. But the story continues over the page, text number 8. It happened at that time regarding Archbishop Andreas. This is his own autobiography. It was discovered 800 years, written 800 years ago, 900 years ago. It happened at that time regarding Archbishop Andreas, the high priest of the city of Bari, that the Lord put the love of Torah and of Moses into his heart. He forsook his land, his priesthood, and all his glory, and came to the city of Constantinople, where he circumcised the flesh of his foreskin. He endured sufferings and hardships. Can you imagine a priest, a bishop, becoming a Jew in those days? He arose and fled for his life from before the Gentiles, seeking to slay him. But the Lord God of Israel saved him from the hands of impurity. The Lord protects proselytes. Blessed be the Lord forever. Many went up after him, and observing his deeds, they did as he had done. They also entered the covenant of the living God. He's talking about himself. All the sages of Christendom were ashamed when they heard the report about him. Johannes heard of the events concerning him while he was still a youth in the house of Drew, his father. Johannes continues to become a priest in the year 1096. He has that dream I mentioned before, where he studies Hebrew, and ultimately he converts to Judaism, taking upon himself the name Ovadia. Ovadia, by the way, was a biblical convert, a descendant of Esau, the book of Ovadia in the Torah. And he became a priest in 1096, but he becomes a convert in 1102. We actually find there's a picture of his siddur on page 16, his own handwritten prayer book. You can see, we can't see it, but it's in the Geniza. You can see that in his own handwritten inscription, he dates his conversion to the date of September 1102. But one thing we don't know is the location of his conversion. Stays a mystery. But I do want to share with you a very interesting letter, which is the affirmation of his conversion on page 18. In this letter, we're going to learn about the process of conversion, of how it works, what they did to him in order to convert him to become Jewish. Very interesting. So it was written by Rabbi Baruch ben Yitzchak of Aleppo in Syria. We read about Aleppo in the news all the time right now with the war in Syria. And this letter certifies the conversion of Ovadia the convert. Take a look. Again, page 18, text 9. To all places of worship and study unto whom this letter shall reach, may they be granted myriad measures of peace. This man, the bearer of the letter, came to our city with an epistle from sages that dwell in his lands. They told us that this man is of a great family, that his father was an important officer, and that this man, Ovadia, is expert in reading their Christian religious books. Because of his understanding of what he read in their erroneous books, he returned to the Lord of Israel with all of his heart, with all of his soul, and with all of his strength, and became a proselyte in a law court of Israel. Now, it's interesting. It says he returned to become a Jew. Why would it do that? Unless lost souls, right? Good. When he came to convert, they informed him that the Israelites were in sorrow, oppressed, despised, and scorned. They tried to convince him out. He said to his informants, do I not know that the Israelites are despised and scorned? If only I would be worthy to join Israel. Persistence. After it was discerned that he came out of love, they informed him of some lenient and some severe commandments, and they informed him of the punishment for the infractions of the commandments. When he accepted all the conditions, they circumcised him immediately, and when he was healed, they ritually immersed him in a mikvah. There were two sages there, either standing on either side of him, and they also reminded him of some lenience and some severe commandments. Then, thus he was made an Israelite for every matter. And now, O our brethren, blessed may you be unto heaven. Be careful of the honor of this man. Take care that you not injure him with your words, that he be not injured by the words of. So, for the Lord God has warned against injury and oppression towards him, as our sages taught. He who wounds the feelings of a proselyte transgresses three negative injunctions. Don't mess with the converts. God is their father. This letter was written in his own hands by our master Baruch, the great and outstanding master, may be guarded by heaven, son of our master Isaac, may his soul rest in peace. Our master Baruch wrote this letter that it might be kept by Ovadia the convert for use in all communities of Israel, to which he might go. In other words, this letter is a letter certifying the conversion of Johannes into Ovadia. So if we look at the details of his conversion process mentioned in this letter, we see how conversion works in Judaism. Number one, we start off with discouragement. You're nuts. You're crazy. We don't need any more crazy people amongst the Jewish people. Take some medicine, call a psychiatrist, maybe get a therapist, but leave us alone. If he persists and he still wants to become a Jew, then we teach him all of the laws of the Torah. This is why conversion takes a couple of years, because you got to learn to not only learn the laws, but you have to actually live the laws. You have to live as a Jew for several years. Then comes the circumcision if you're a male, and the mikvah, and then you're pretty much done. That's the process of conversion. So we know that Ovadia, Johannes, converted, but we never figured out where he converted. All we have is this letter which endorses his conversion. Why? The reason seems to be that his conversion took place in Christian lands, whereas this letter was written in Aleppo in Muslim lands. And the Muslims didn't have a problem with Christians converting to Judaism. The Christians had problems with Christians converting to Judaism. Having a letter certifying the conversion of a Christian priest, of an Italian priest, to become a Jew was a death wish for whoever was signed on that conversion certificate. And that's why he needed a rabbi from a Muslim country who was willing to put his name on a document that he was invulnerable. He was not likely to be prosecuted for that. And that's probably just explains to us, gives us a little bit of context as to the dangers involved. We know just a little bit more about him. I want to just expand about him. I want to tell you that in his subsequent travels after his conversions in the year 1109, he goes to various locations. You can see a map of his travels on page 24, where he travels to various places. He goes off to Syria. You can read about it in text number 10. But he basically goes to Baghdad. The Jews there are persecuted. He even encounters, they're persecuted by the Muslims. He encounters not one, but two false messiahs. You know what false messiahs are? These are people that claim to be the Messiah, and they kind of lead Jews with false hope. It's very sad when that happens. Ultimately, he goes to Egypt in 1121, but it's interesting when you look at the map of his travels and on that page 24, he goes from Syria to Egypt, not through the land of Israel. Why would he not go through the land of Israel? He went by sea because it was too dangerous for an Italian priest converted to Judaism to travel through Christian lands. Israel then was in the hands of the Christians. Remember the Crusades, right? In Egypt, he meets a fellow by the name of Solomon, who also claims to be the Messiah. Turns out this guy was a member of the Karaites. The Karaites were the Jews that didn't believe in the oral Torah. They only believed in the written Torah. But this guy, he claimed that he was the Messiah and that he was a descendant of, he was a Kohen. If you're a Kohen, it means you're a priest from the tribe of Levi. Now, the problem is, there's a technical problem here because the Messiah can only be from the tribe, a descendant of David, from the tribe of Judah. So he kind of proved him exposed him as a fraud. We don't know anything else about the rest of the life of Ovadia the convert, other than his autobiography mysteriously landing in the Cairo Geniza and surviving 800 years of anti-Semitism to fall into our hands to this very day. But one thing that we have from him, which I'd love to share with you, is his extraordinary gift to the Jewish people. Because amongst his autobiography were 3 pages of sheet music, liturgical songs with musical notes that he brought from his Italian Christian heritage to Judaism. This is, what I'm about to play for you, is the oldest existing actual notations of Jewish music, going back almost 900 years. Researchers have been able to render these notes into modern music so that we can listen to it right now. The song I'm about to play is a poem written by him, and the music composed by him. It's a poem about Moses and the Torah being given to the Jewish people during the festival of Shavuos, which is the festival that we're going to be celebrating in early June, receiving the Torah for the 3,339th time. When you listen to this song, I encourage you to feel like you are in 12th century Italy on the festival of Shavuos, listening to the service being led by Ovadia the convert, formerly Johannes the Italian priest from Oppida, Luciano. You can actually see the lyrics on page 22 in text number 11. The lyrics will also appear on the screen. Here goes.
Ovadia the convert wrote the oldest surviving piece of Jewish sheet music. These pages were preserved in the Geniza storage room of Cairo's Ben Ezra synagogue, which Ovadia would have frequented. Recently renovated, the Ben Ezra synagogue still stands in its original location. This is the song.
וכבוד אדוני עלייך זרע.
Haunting melodies, bridging the generations over 800 years. Those lost souls, when they come home, they bring gifts with them. And if Onkelos, our first convert today, brought the gift of wisdom in the translation, the first translation and commentary of Torah, then it was Ovadia the convert who brought the gift of music, the oldest existing music brought to the Jewish people, influencing Jewish song, enriching our heritage from his circuitous route through the Italian priesthood in order to bring that gift to the Jewish people. And with this, I am going to move on to our third guest here today, our third and final convert today, which is the very moving story of Avraham, the son of Avraham. If Onkelos was 2,000 years ago, and Ovadia the convert was 850, 900 years ago, then this story moves us to the mid-18th century into the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, where a young Polish nobleman by the name of Count Valentin Potocki, or otherwise known as Graf Potocki, the Count, was the one who chose to convert to Judaism. Unlike the autobiography of Ovadia the convert that we have because it survived the Cairo Geniza, there is no written record about the story of Avram and Avraham. It was too dangerous. It was passed on orally, but the first time it was printed was in 1862 in a book called Geirei HaTzedek, the Righteous Converts, published in a city called Johannesburg, not South Africa, but Johannesburg in Prussia, which is today's Poland. Why was it published there? Because strict Christian censorship didn't operate in those locations at that time, and therefore Jewish publishing and learning flourished there for some time. We'll be using that text as our source today. So what inspired him to convert? Let's take a look at text number 12 as to the story of the Polish nobleman Valentin Potocki. Page 27. The year was 5479 since creation. That's 1719 in our calendar. A Polish nobleman named Potocki had a brilliant son. The local university in Vilna was no longer sufficient for the boy, so his father sent him to study in Paris. At the same time, a nobleman in the region of Samogitia named Zarembi also had a brilliant son, and he was also sent to study in Paris. The two young men became very close friends. One day, as the two young men were strolling in a garden in Paris, they happened across an old man reading a book engrossed in study. Impressed by the way the old man was studying, the young man asked, "What is the name of the book you're studying? What are its contents? Theology or some other subject?" The old man told them it is a book of the divine Torah. "Please teach us from this precious book," the young man asked the venerable elderly scholar. "We also wish to learn this Torah of truth." "My dear children," the old man responded, "I cannot teach you from this book because you will not understand its content and style. Also, you are forbidden from studying this book by law because it is contrary to your religion." "Listen to us, wise old man," the young student said. "God has blessed us with great intelligence. Have mercy on us and teach us this dear Torah. Do not be afraid of the government. We will keep it a secret. Please do this for us and show us the light." The old man had mercy on the students and he studied it with them. They studied Torah for 6 months and understood it well. They recognized that the Jewish religion is the truth and could no longer tolerate their religion. "Can we just stay here all our lives?" they asked each other. "Let us travel to Amsterdam and there we will convert." Clearly, Paris was still a Christian country, and they weren't able to convert over there, but they moved to Amsterdam, and there was safe. And there, Valentin, the Count Potocki, took upon himself the name Avraham ben Avraham, Avraham, the son of Avraham. Why do we do that? Whenever somebody converts till this day, You always go by your father and your mother's Hebrew name. So what happens if you converted? We go by the name of Abraham, the first Jew, and Sarah, a matriarch, right? So a woman would be, she takes a name like Rachel, daughter of Sarah, or Yisrael, the son of Abraham, right? That's how we go. So this was Abraham, the son of Abraham. So let's take a look at his story. As we saw, he discovered the Torah of truth in Paris, and he converted to Amsterdam to become Avraham ben Avraham. But then, inexplicably, he took a very dangerous move. Unlike Ovadia the convert, who stayed very far away from Christian lands, Avraham ben Avraham returned back to Poland. He tried to be cautious by moving to a different town called Ilya, where he spent his days in shul, engrossed in Torah study and in prayer. Let's take a look at what happened to him in text 13. Again, it's all from the same original text. Page 29. The righteous Potocki traveled from Amsterdam to Lithuania. He spent every moment of his time engrossed in Torah study or prayer. His heart was completely devoted to Torah, and he would fast and subject his body to afflictions. His praises cannot adequately be told in writing. During prayer, his eyes would pour with rivers of tears. One day, this holy man came to the shul, and he saw a young man, the son of the local tailor, laughing, shouting, and wildly throwing his hat in the air in front of the synagogue's holy ark. So he was disrespectful. Sounds like a Jewish boy. Potocki was very upset, and he scolded the young man. "You insolent fellow, why aren't you showing respect for God? How can you stand in the synagogue in front of the ark with your head uncovered? Put your hat back on." He must have been a Jew. The young man's wicked father was enraged. I remember the rest of the story. This boy, Avraham ben Avraham, told him that he was going to convert out of Judaism. He was going to become a renegade, a heretic, and he was going to convert out of Judaism. And actually, that's what happened. When his father heard about it, he lost his temper, he just lost it. And he went to the local nobleman and he said to him, "You should know that the lost son of the great nobleman Potocki is in our town, sitting in the synagogue. He has converted to Judaism and he sharply denigrates your religion. Send officers to arrest him before he flees." Bad news, right? The nobleman did as the wicked man advised him. He brought 300 officers and they surrounded the town. They arrested Potocki and placed him in prison, bound in iron shackles. The punishment was clear, friends. What do you think the punishment was? Execution. There's no tolerance. He did try to deny his identity. He tried to swear that he wasn't this guy, but to no avail. They tried to convince him to return to Christianity. They begged him, but he refused. They sent his own mother to beg him to renounce, at least openly. Just at least openly say that you regret what you did and you accept Christianity. Yet he refused. In a fascinating twist of events, you might have heard of another famous Jew from the city of Vilna, called the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon was the great sage of Vilna. He was 29 years old at the time of this story. He sent a message to Avraham ben Avraham in the prison, and he said to him, "I'm going to send you a Kabbalistic name that when you utter this name, you will miraculously be transported out of the prison into safety." Do you remember the story of Moses having killed the Egyptian? Remember that story in the Bible? It says Moses spoke and the Egyptian died, because this is practical Kabbalah. This is what Ashton Kutcher and the other Kabbalists of Hollywood are trying to achieve. They wish that they can access this wisdom of practical Kabbalah to be able to have this kind of power. The Vilna Gaon had it. Moses had it. He said, "I'm going to give you this name and you will be able to recite this name to free yourself." But Avraham ben Avraham shockingly refused. He actually, what would you say? I mean, if you were in that position and some rabbi said to you, "I'm going to give you a secret name and you'll be able to be transported to safety." Yeah. Amazing. This Avraham ben Avraham refused to accept this gesture. Very kind offer, if I may say so myself. And he said, no, I want to die for my convictions. Wow. Let's see what happens to him in the end. Text 14, page 31. The ruling was given. Abraham's tongue should be ripped out of his mouth, and he should be burned at the stake on the second day of Shavuos, the day of the giving of the Torah. He indeed rose to heaven on that day, and the Jewish people mourned bitterly the murder of this special man. All the Jews of Vilna prayed at home on that day, pouring copious tears. They peered through the shutters and saw him being led to the stake, his face shining like the sun. He went joyfully like a man dancing toward God's mountain. Isn't that interesting? We're living in a time when we see Jews being murdered by Hamas or by Hezbollah or other terrorists, and our heart breaks. Yet this Jew willingly, at some point, obviously, when he realized that his fate was sealed, he said, no, if they're going to kill me for my faith, then that's what I want. I want the merit of dying for my convictions. And in fact, his yahrzeit is the second day of Shavuos. In his final words, I want to share with you what his final words were. These words are words that we recite every single day in our morning prayers. But until I realized where these words come from, I just would read them every day. But now it's a whole different experience for me to read these words. Take a look, text 15. It's just part of our daily service. When you realize that these were words written by, or at least recited by him before his death, on the way to his death, while he was dancing joyfully, they acquire a whole new meaning. Page 32. But we are your nation, the people of your covenant, the children of Abraham, your beloved. The play in words, the children of Abraham. He was the son of Abraham, to whom you swore in Mount Moriah, the descendants of Isaac, his only son, who was bound upon the altar. Right? Remember, Isaac was bound upon the altar. He was almost killed for his faith, Isaac. But here, Avram was actually killed for his faith. The community of Jacob, your firstborn. Therefore, it is incumbent upon us to thank, praise, and glorify you, to bless, to sanctify, and to offer praise and thanksgiving to your name. Fortunate are we. How good is our portion, how pleasant our lot, and how beautiful our heritage. Fortunate are we who early in the morning and in the evening twice each day declare, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Sanctify your name in your world. This is what happens when a Jew dies for his faith. He's sanctifying the name of God upon the people who hallow your name. Through your salvation, our King, rise and exalt our strength, and deliver us speedily for the sake of your name. Blessed is he who sanctifies his name amongst the multitudes. Our tradition captures the tune that Avraham ben Avraham sang on the way to his death. And I'd like to play it for you right now in this next 2-minute video. Once again, this is the actual tune that Avraham ben Avraham sang as he was reading these words, singing these words that we just read, on his way to having his execution for his conviction. A count born into the lap of luxury, choosing to become a Jew. Take a look.
The righteous convert Avraham ben Avraham was sentenced to death for converting to Judaism. Refusing all entreaties to abandon Judaism, he was burned at the stake in Vilna on the second day of Shavuot, 1749. The grave of Avraham ben Avraham in the old Vilna Jewish cemetery was a popular pilgrimage site for generations. This cemetery was destroyed by the Soviets in 1950. Tradition has passed down the tune with which Avraham sang some of his final prayers.
אבל אנחנו עמך, בני וריסך, בני אברהם, אוי הבך, שנשבעת אלוהי בהר המוריה, זרע יצחק יחידוי, שנקד על גבי המזבח. אבל אנחנו עמך, בני וריסך, בני אברהם, אוי הבך, שנשבעת אלוהי בהר המוריה, זרע יצחק יחידוי, שנקד על גבי המזבח. יתברך.
After he was murdered, burnt at the stake, an intrepid Jew by the name of Eliezer Shishkis bribed the executioner to receive the ashes, and he buried them in the Vilna cemetery where you saw them, which became a pilgrimage site. Somehow, after the Soviets destroyed it, his grave still survived. Like there were other graves that were moved at that time. And to this day, the shuls in Vilna will recite a special memorial prayer to Avraham ben Avraham, for the memory of Avraham ben Avraham on the second day of Shavuos, the day of his Yortzeit. What's interesting is, when we ask ourselves, did the story really happen? I mean, it sounds a little far-fetched that a nobleman would choose to abandon the lap of luxury and to become a Jew, to die such a miserable death. But it's actually interesting because we have two sources to corroborate the story. One is in 1755, the writings of Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes a very similar account of the story that corroborates the events. But even another source is in 1753 in the London Magazine, or the Gentleman's Monthly Influencer. You can actually see a picture of the article on page 35 in your book. Let's take a look at what it says. It's text 16. Let's read the article just the way it appears in the London Magazine, 1753. Again, page 34, text 16. From Vilna in Poland, June 11th, we have an instance equally shocking of Polish Catholic revenge against the Jew as follows. The court of judicature in the city pronounced sentence a few days ago against an apostate named Raphael Sentimani, a native of Croatia, who, after being educated in the Christian religion, renounced it at the age of 12 years, embraced Judaism, and took the name of Avraham Izakovitz. While he was imprisoned, several zealous priests daily visited him, shewing him the heinousness of the crime of apostasy and exhorting him to repent and to return to the church. And for a day or two they had hopes of reclaiming him, but they soon found themselves mistaken. He was so hardened that neither the torments he was to suffer nor the offer of pardon could make any impression on him. The ninth instant he was led to execution. Being arrived under the gallows, the executioner plucked out his tongue and flung it into the fire before his face. And then with his hands tied behind him, he was thrown alive into the heap of blazing faggots, the sticks. When his body was consumed, the ashes were scattered in the wind. The poor wretch suffered death with great resolution, not so much as a groan, or at least a sign of fear, having escaped from him. So interesting as you read this, the name was Raphael Sentimani. That doesn't sound like Johannes, which we mentioned before. Remember, he denied his true identity, right? So when he was captured, he denied, he gave him a different name. Another thing is, when you read Raphael Sentimani's criminal record, where was he arrested? In the town of Ilya, which is where Avraham ben Avraham was captured. Another thing is ninth instant. What does the ninth instant mean? In Old English, apparently it means the 9th of June of that year, 1753. And if you check the Hebrew date of the 9th of June, 1753, it corresponds to the second day of Shavuos, which is the Hebrew date of his Yortzeit. Very, very sad. But this Avraham ben Avraham didn't leave us any writings. What was his contribution to us? Not wisdom, like Onkelos the convert, not music, like Ovadia the convert, but rather, maybe that tune might have been his contribution, but rather his contribution was his devotion and love, his courage and commitment to his faith, that impacted Jews in a deeply powerful and tangible manner. It forces us to this day to reconsider our commitment to our faith. Think about that for a second. How do you feel about being willing to die for your faith? There's another story at that time. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, was also around at that time. And the Baal Shem Tov was traveling with his students to save Avraham ben Avraham. He was on the way to also rescue him, but inexplicably at some point he turned around and abandoned mission. Later on, the Baal Shem Tov said, quote, that the Jews of sincere and authentic faith require the example of Avram ben Avraham to inspire their devotion to their faith. So if you think about it, Avram ben Avraham gave us the gift of commitment. That if a Jew by choice was able to so joyously and lovingly embrace his ability to die for his conviction, to die for God, then how much more so should we passionately be willing to live for God? And that really gets us thinking. In closing, there's a legend out there that says, I can't confirm this for sure, but the legend goes that Einstein was once asked, Albert Einstein, was once asked what he regrets. And he famously said, according to this legend, that the one thing he regrets is having been born a Jew. Why? Because having been born a Jew, he was denied the opportunity to choose to become one. Interesting, right? Whether it's true or not, it's a nice quote, right? They were building a highway or a factory. They didn't do any law and order. The communists do whatever they wanted. No, so the Torah tells us something very, very interesting about conversion, about converting to Judaism. The Torah tells us that the real reason why we have been subjected to this lengthy exile of almost 2,000 years since the Romans destroyed our temple is in order that converts should be added to our people. Take a look, page 36, text 17. The Talmud says, text 17, God exiled Israel amongst the nations only so that converts would join them. Now, what does that mean? A literal interpretation of that means that whilst we don't actively seek out converts, we do seek to allow them in if they persist so that they can bring their gifts that they bring, right? The lost soul should come up. But on a deeper level, there's something profound going on, and that's explained to us in the Chassidus on text 18. Chassidus explains that just like the non-Jew becoming a Jew, each and every single one of us has elements of unholiness in our lives that we need to transform into holiness. And when you transform elements of dysfunction in your own life into a state of function, then you are converting evil within yourself. And that's the purpose of exile. So if you were raised with a difficult mother or an emotionally absent father, if you were traumatized in one way or another, whether it was through the Holocaust or you were bullied on the schoolyard or some other which way, poverty, something else, instead of resenting the dark days that you've experienced in your past, when you are mindful about them and you see them as your divine mission to correct, tikkun olam, when you can take that darkness and transform it into positivity, to use your negative experience to make you into a more sensitive parent, to break this cycle of violence. If your mother gave you silent treatment, then now you become a more attentive parent instead of perpetuating the cycle, then you've converted. You've converted the negative into the positive, the dark into the light, the unholy into the holy. And the same applies when it comes to every place that we visit and every thing that we touch. As Jews, we know we have to infuse holiness everywhere we go. So if you're stuck in an airport in Geneva, or if you're stuck on the side of the highway waiting for a tire change, instead of just cursing your luck, say a little prayer, do a little mitzvah, lay tefillin, read some Torah. Maybe the reason that you went there is because you need to infuse holiness into that location, turning dark into light, unholy into holy. Let's take a look at this idea. On the last idea, page 37, text 18. Our sages taught that God exiled Israel amongst the nations only so that converts would join them. Beyond the literal meaning of actual converts, this teaching also has a deeper meaning that is relevant to every Jew. Our bodies and natural instincts are a blend of good and bad. Our natural condition from our youngest age is that we are controlled by our negative inclination. In the spirit of the verse, every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil and not good at all. We have a lot of evil inside of us, dysfunction. However, we were created in the divine image. Our soul is a veritable piece of godliness. We are therefore empowered to transform our hearts and natural instincts so that they are devoted solely and truly to love and all for God. We are also empowered to harness all of our thoughts and actions to this end and thereby fully accept the divine yoke of Torah and mitzvahs. When we accomplish this, we are converts, having transformed ourselves and completely accepted divine authority. In other words, we are called upon, the purpose of the exile is to add converts to the people. Great. We are called upon to be converts by converting the inner work of the darkness in our lives and the outer work of making sure to turn everything we touch into holiness and into beauty. And when we do that, we are making conversion everywhere we go. So when somebody asks you if you're a Jew by choice, you can say yes, or maybe you could say, not yet, but I'm working on it. Right? Let me just conclude with a short summary of everything that we learned today.
Lesson 1. Courageous Converts. Narratives. 1. Onkelos was born into the Roman royal family shortly after the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in the 1st century CE. Attracted to the revolutionary Jewish concepts of a single God who cares for his people and guides them, Onkelos risked his life to convert to Judaism. He became the author of the first translation of the Torah, a monumental work studied until today. 2. Long-lost documents uncovered in the Cairo Geniza capture the fascinating story of an Italian priest named Johannes, who converted to Judaism in the early 12th century. Johannes became Ovadia and was forced to flee his home country in order to live as a Jew. He endured wanderings and difficulties in his life, but he enriched Jewish worship with his liturgical music. 3. Valentine Potocki was the brilliant young son of a Polish nobleman who converted to Judaism in the mid-18th century. Known by the Jewish name Avraham ben Avraham, he was arrested by the authorities in Lithuania and sentenced to death. He steadfastly refused offers to save his life if he returned to Christianity, and he went to his execution joyfully. The story of his incredible dedication and sacrifice has inspired generations of Jews. General points. 1. Unique among world religions, Judaism does not believe that non-Jews need to join it, and potential converts are actively dissuaded. Nevertheless, Judaism does accept converts who are persistent, with the understanding that these people possess a latent Jewish soul. 2. Converts to Judaism are considered to possess particularly powerful souls. Over the generations, converts have made unique contributions to Jewish life.
So this marks the conclusion of lesson 1. Next week, we'll be talking about the Jews that were a light unto the nations. For example, a Jewish child born in the shadow of the Spanish-Portuguese Inquisition, whose writings flung open the gates of Jewish wisdom with profound impact upon the architects of the American Revolution. We'll learn about an 11th century Torah sage who became the commander of a Muslim army, and about a leading Italian rabbi and his non-Jewish German student who saved the Talmud from destruction and established it as a source of wisdom for all people. If you haven't yet registered for the course, we'd love to sign you up and order a textbook for you for next week's Torah class, same time, same place. I don't have any staff over here, they've all left. But if you wanted to sign up and just hand to me your registration form, I'd be happy to take it from you. As always, I'm honored to take your email address, your emails with your questions and your comments. And I hope that you'll join me next week. Would love to hear from you. Thank you very much.